This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium-bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. It is episode 197 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Make sure you're following Subway to Shea on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally, as you see below, at Ant Rivera 86. And subscribe on YouTube, like the video, share it. Make sure you get it out to all the Met fans that are out there so they can enjoy the same exact content as you are. And if you are following on YouTube, you can join in on the chat. You can join in on the conversation. If you prefer to listen to the show, it'll be up a little bit later on in the day on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can subscribe there. A lot to talk about. And also, happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there. As well, if you're a dog mom or a pet mom, you are included in this conversation. So happy Mother's Day to everyone out there, all the women that do an incredible job, especially Mrs. Subway to Shea, who's celebrating her first Mother's Day. So shout out to her as well. Shout out to everyone in the chat. We got 24 people in the room already. We're going to have a lot of fun today. So we're going to talk a lot of Mets here. And shout out to John K. Shout out to Tom, who's in here, Nelson Cruz, Rosie K. Shout out to all you people. Appreciate you. And we got a special guest today, a good friend of mine and a good friend to the show, Sam Maxwell. How are you, Sam? How's it going, my friend?
Hey, Anthony, what's going on? Let's go Mets, as always. You got Nelson Cruz showing up. Listen to that. How about that?
Yeah. The Nelson Cruz in the house, good fan and friend of the show. Sam, as we know, I like to call him, and every time he comes on the show, I like to say the jack of all trades. He's an actor, screenwriter, musician, the host of Bedford and Son, which I finally found is on YouTube. I didn't even know you started YouTube out there, but I subscribed and make sure everyone subscribes as well to Bedford and Sullivan.
Yeah, trying to get, it's been like 13 years since I first had Larry King and the Brooklyn Borough historian Ron Schweiger on as my first episode. And what a way to start, right? With Larry King and the man that knows everything about Brooklyn in Ron Schweiger. It was an incredible way to start, but I never had a YouTube page. It was always audio only. So, right now it's just the clips. I need to get the full episode up there, but c'est la vie, such is life, and we're here for the Mets. And, that's the Mets are part of that National League legacy in New York that I always like to talk about.
Yeah, we can't, not mention the Metsian podcast. I know we lost good friend Mike Licolant this past week. And we're going to get into that a little bit later on in the show. But, Sam, as always, great to have you on and to be a part of Subway to Shea. We've been talking since the beginning of when I started this podcast. We've kind of been on this journey together with this and the Metsian podcast, and we'd always go on each other's show. And, I appreciate the friendship that has been built from there since then for a team that's not always giving, but, we have that bond of being Met fans and friends together.
Well, last night, I think, is a perfect example of just how frustrating sometimes it can be to be a Mets fan, but these games are going to happen. But every time a game like that happens, excuse me, I always think about something that I saw from another dear friend of the podcast, and I believe of yours, Greg Prince, Faith and Fear in Flushing.
Yeah.
He once pointed out in 2012 that the 1962 Mets had the tying runner either on base or on deck in 50 of the 120 losses. So this has kind of been in the DNA of the team that a lot of those losses in 1962 were by one run. So that yesterday, Brett Baty tried to get us there as much as he possibly could, but unfortunately we couldn't get over the hump twice.
I remember there was someone that posted this. I don't know if it was yesterday. I really wish I would have saved the post, But out of the, I think it's now 15 games that the Mets have lost, at least 12 of them have been by one run.
Yeah.
So, they're in every game.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think that's the frustrating part. Like when you're totally out of a game, you don't really tend to overanalyze everything when you lose 8-0 or 9-0 or 6-2 or nothing. When you lose a one-run game, that's when everything gets, blown up and you start like, oh, should Mendy have done this? Or, what if they hit and pinch hit here? Or what if they pitch this guy here? And everything gets a little more frustrating. But like, this is the kind of games you want. You want to be on the winning side of them 100% of the time. But when you are playing these games, you're in first place, 10 games over 500, and your team is showing that fight and is only, losing by one run or less than most of those games, you got a competitive team here.
It's a very competitive team. I think like something, unfortunately I had to monitor on game day basically yesterday. So I wasn't able to really get in the weeds with the game. But one of the things, I think it's hard not to be hypercritical as a fan base overall about Juan Soto, because it looks like he's making strides. And then I believe he was 0 for 5 last night, unfortunately, with some at bats that you just wish you could take back. So I'm kind of curious, I think it's the ebbs and flows of the season for sure. And, we've seen this before with some of these contracts when these players are first taking off, whether it's Carlos Beltran, whether it's Francisco Lindor, and the way he got it started. And look at him now. I mean, it's hard to not include him in one of the most beloved Mets ever at this point. So you have to assume that Juan Soto is going to settle in and really be much more consistent. Obviously, it's one game, but those RBI numbers, the runners in scoring position, that's really where I want to start seeing some progress with him.
And I'm glad you brought that up because that's kind of where we're going to start the show today. Juan Soto's kind of been in a little bit of a power surge here, right? Last 15 games, he's batting .298, 5 homers, 7 RBIs, has 11 walks, also has 11 strikeouts. So that's big. 2 games, and I think both of them were against Arizona. He had 2-homer game. So 4 of those home runs come already from those 2 games there. But as you mentioned, with runners in scoring position, and these are a couple of comments from the chat here. Rosie K saying the offense is still not clicking. They have so many opportunities with runners on base that they aren't able to capitalize on. They have lost 3.5 games over the Phillies in the standings. Not good. Tom also agreeing that runners in scoring position has been an issue for a few years now. I don't think it's limited to the current roster. It has been a problem for such a long time. No matter who you put on the roster. And I think the problem becomes not the guys at the front, although, Soto has not really taken off. He has a 147 batting average with runners in scoring position. So he is a part of the problem. But the other part of the problem is you're not getting consistency out of that bottom of the lineup. When you're switching everybody in the order, when you have McNeil playing and then you don't have Acuna when he's hot, and then you're switching everyone around. Mark Vientos is not off to a hot start, although the last 7 to 15 games he's been playing a whole lot better, kind of the player that he played like last year. But he's struggling with the runners in scoring position. I think he's hitting around it's definitely a little bit over 100, but nothing to be proud about. But it looks like Soto's coming around. I know that Saturday game was a little rough for him with runners in scoring position again. And I don't know if it's feeling the pressure. We go, like you said, we go through this with every top free agent we have ever signed. Jason Bay, who, to a lesser extent, is not the talent that Soto is, but we signed him to a big contract and we expected him to, play well. Mike Piazza, when he first comes over in the trade, he doesn't have the hot start. Carlos Beltran, same thing. Francisco Lindor, all of these guys have come in and to some extent struggle. And I got to ask you, what are your, I guess, first impressions of what you've seen from Soto so far? Because even though he's really not been a huge factor when it comes to big innings to bring in runs. It's a lot of his home runs have been solo shots, but he has had an impact on this team. They're off to a pretty good start. I mean, the world is not ending, at least just now. I mean, if we're going to look at the standings, you're going to look at the standings. This team is in first place right now. I mean, things could change. It's early, but to have that lead is pretty good right now.
Well, the Phillies are no slouch, of course. They're going to be in it, and it's nice. It's how often do these dog fights really happen? It's not that often, with one of our biggest rivals, and of course, I just think about 2022, and the Mets have a tough time winning a division when it's close. And so that's that's what I wanted to see back in 2022, and that's what I'm hoping, that if it does stay this close, and hopefully they can either continue to be in first place or just keep it close, of course, that they last year, even though it was the wild card, that was such an incredible sign that things were starting to move in the right direction with this franchise. Now, he mentioned that this has been, I forget what the name of the commenter was, but he mentioned that these runners in scoring position have been an issue for years now. And I go all the way back to 1962, like I opened the show with. And Tom right there. So, I wonder whether let's take Mark Vientos for an example, because yes, he's been starting to collect those hits, but the power isn't there yet. I mean, we were talking about 27 home runs from basically middle of May onward. And so you're hoping that type of power has something to do with the early part of the year, and that it's not completely zapped, and that you'll start seeing that power surge with him as the summer goes on. Sometimes we forget, as we're overanalyzing everything, the fact that the Mets didn't turn on until May 30th last year, and we're not even we're not even to May 15th now. Not to say that you wouldn't want more consistency throughout the year. It's just that everything is ebbs and flows, and unfortunately, that you have to be reactive if you're David Stearns and you're Carlos Mendoza. And to their credit, from last year, we saw how reactive they were in terms of the roster moves, and I have seen the same thing, especially with the way the bullpen's gone down. But going back to Juan Soto, I take him at his word when it comes to the idea that that there's nothing different pressure-wise, because there's always pressure. But It's hard not to notice that shuffle's not there. And you wonder what, how do you say, if you're anybody in that clubhouse, let alone Carlos Mendoza or David Stearns, hey Juan, you're not doing the shuffle. But it was always a huge intimidating factor for him, the way that he would shuffle. And I'm very curious why that's kind of disappeared from his game. It's such a silly thing for us to notice and also critique in terms of it not being there. But that was, again, part of the aura. So, but before I throw it back to you about it, like you said, it is obvious that while he is not necessarily just turned on he hasn't completely just gone crazy, except for a really good May so far. It's obvious that from up and down the lineup, they are a better team because Juan Soto is right there. And I think whether it's the Lindor start, which we have never really seen, I can't, looking back even on his Cleveland years, he usually doesn't start like this. And that is a great sign, the fact that he's hitting close to 300 right now, that the whole year is going to be even crazier of an MVP performance. MVP type performance. And then Pete Alonso, who has dipped a little bit in the average. I mean, were we really expecting him to be Ted Williams all year? I don't think so. But the at bats are so much more competitive than maybe, forget about last year, than maybe we've ever seen out of him. And it's obvious because Juan Soto is there.
Yeah, and I do get a little surprised when Mets fans get so frustrated or get too happy over some of these starts. We've seen the worst, which was last season, starting off 0-5, having that awful May, and this team made the playoffs. There's been other years. I think it was the year that the Mets had Mickey Callaway as the manager. I think they got off to, was it a 12-1 start to start the year? And that team imploded and went nowhere. So you got to kind of just keep the middle ground when it comes to this team right now. Obviously, Pete Alonso got off to an amazing start. We're seeing a lot of better at-bats from him. But you know that he's going to kind of middle out. Like, there's going to be some middle ground here with him. Soto is not going to be – I can't fathom Soto being this bad with runners in scoring position for the entire year. I can't see it. You know, and the same thing, you mentioned Francisco Lindor got off to one of the worst starts last season. I think he was batting 089 by the time we got to May. And then by the end of the year, he's in conversations to be the MVP. So that, you know, you have to take these games. It's a long season. You have to take them for what it is. There's a grind that's a part of it. I am more concerned, and we'll probably get into this a little bit later, about the pitching more than I am about the hitting, because we're not getting starters going more than 5 or 6 innings, and it's taxing this is a big month for this bullpen. And we're already starting to see a little bit of the cracks here and there. Ryan Stanek struggling, Max Kranick coming back down to earth. We're not getting the same Jose Buto we got last year. Daniel Nunez is coming back from injury. So we're seeing a little bit of a taxed bullpen right now, and I want to see how they can recover more so than the offense. Obviously, we know the offense is struggling. As Tom said, this has been known for years that they struggle with runners in scoring position. I don't know if it's a philosophy thing, but if you blame Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes, they're not the ones that are hitting. It's the players that are hitting. So you're in a slippery slope when it comes to this team. I think you just got to sit back, go with it, see how we get to when we get to the trade deadline, and move on from there, because the most important part is for this team to get hot, getting into the playoffs and into the playoffs if they're so lucky to make it. And I think it was Rosie K who said, I think that the issue this year is that there's so many competitive teams in the National League that it will be hard to make the playoffs. So winning the division should be a goal. Yeah,
that's a great point.
Winning the division has to be the goal for this team. You got all those teams out west that are playing well. The Chicago Cubs are playing well in the Central. You got Milwaukee as well. And then you got the Mets, the Phillies, and I will never discount the Braves. I don't care how terrible start they get out to, and they're playing better than
I think they're 2020 now after last
year.
night.
Yeah, look at their turnaround. So, I'm never discounting the Braves. Rosie K is absolutely right. This team has to somewhat find a way to win the division. And obviously these one-run games are important, especially the ones that they lost, because we look at it at the end of the season. And are we backing into the playoffs like we did last year on percentage points? Like, you don't want to continuously do that every season.
Yeah, going to the bullpen too, like Kranick, that one pitch last night, because this does seem to be happening with him currently, where it's one pitch. He's one pitch from getting out of the inning, and that seemed last night like, and I don't know whether it, we were talking about the offense too, and I thought about Alvarez, and I think this is a good transition since we're talking about the bullpen, that you do wonder about when you see somebody as incredible as Torrens is at handling the pitching staff. And all we've ever heard is how good Alvarez has been handling the pitching staff. And I know that he was out for most of April, but you're also wondering, not only from a hitting perspective, but from a catching perspective, whether after all these years, now we're really seeing who Alvarez is and is going to be. And last year we were surging at the beginning of the year, and then Alvarez went down. And then we had, and this is, when Nito was still on the team and we didn't have Torrens yet. And you just wonder whether some of the play calling could tighten up. I think especially when it comes to the framing of the pitches, which Alvarez is supposed to be incredible at, I think that gets into his head too much, because I've seen this consistency, or it's not a consistent. I don't want to say that consistent. It always sounds like that's a positive word, but I see him consistently not catch the ball. And Anthony, I'm not sure if you know this, but probably the number one thing that a catcher should do is catch the ball.
Yeah, he had this problem last season too.
Yeah. And it's just all these passed balls also weigh on the pitcher. And I don't think there was anything of note last night in terms of during the Kranick part. But, we're right there. And obviously Baty right after that made it yet another interesting game with the second home run of the night. And, we'll get more into the weeds about Baty coming around. But I think that the bullpen with Nunez going to Nunez, he's settling back in, so I can't overanalyze it. But it has been frustrating that he, even if he's just coming back from injury, the fact that he's so wild and he's not throwing strikes, a lot of people like to criticize Mendy sometimes with that bullpen and not having somebody immediately behind Nunez in case he falters. And obviously, this is basically only 2 games we're talking about here.
And there's also the 3 batters rule.
And there's also the 3 batters rule, of course, exactly. So, which, in the Arizona game, he walked all 3 of those batters. I think that stuff like that, whether it's Budo, whether it's Nunez, he is showing confidence in these guys and being like, I believe in you, go get them. And they're not necessarily taking the bull by the horns when it comes to that, which is which is taxing the bullpen even more, having to get Garrett up, having to get Edwin Diaz up. Luckily last night, Diaz had a clean inning and it didn't affect anything on that side of things. But, these count, even if you're not getting into a game. But at the same time, what is it? 3 or 4 relievers have gone down over the last few weeks. I think Stearns has done an admirable job of feeling it out and piecing it together. And we got Brooks Rowley coming back at some point on the lefty side of things after a couple lefties went down in AJ Minter and Danny Young. And what's so frustrating about the Danny Young thing is the fact that he was just really starting to get consistent and really become a big part of this bullpen and be in the circle of trust. AJ Minter, the part that really frustrates me from a rivalry perspective is the fact that we finally got, just like all of these other NL East teams tend to do, they take our players and they end up surging. I really liked the fact that we took a Brave and that he was going to be such a major part of the bullpen, but it stinks. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, let's get into these injuries. Got a little bit of injury update since the last time we were on the podcast last Sunday. AJ Minter down, Danny Young down, even Jesse Winker. We know both AJ Minter and Danny Young done for the season. AJ Minter is out actually 10 to 12 months. So we're not going to see him until probably, I want to say, June-ish, maybe.
Was that a 2-year deal?
Year. He did sign a 2-year deal for $22 million. He tore the left muscle, his left lat muscle right off the bone. Interesting to know, he mentioned, and this is an interesting point that he mentioned during a presser, that increasing the velocity at the rapid rate that he was doing could be a reason for this injury. You know, we've been hearing a lot about
coming back from the other injury.
Yeah, you were hearing so much about velocity and its impact on these injuries. So that's just an important note to add. You mentioned Danny Young also out for the season. When you hear them go, oh, they're getting talked about with Tommy John surgery, you already know the season's over for those players. They can do the second, third opinions. The Tommy John surgery, I feel like as soon as you say the word, it's going to happen. So it sucks to lose him as well. He struck out the last 5 batters that he faced before getting injured. 2 of them were big in Harper and Schwarber when they played the Phillies. To fill the void right now, Genesis Cabrera is up here. He's been okay. Also, you mentioned Brooks Raley, who probably won't be ready till, I would assume, until at least July. He's also coming back from Tommy John surgery. And then Jesse Winker on the injured list, out 6 to 8 weeks with the right oblique strain. You know, for you, which of these 3 injuries do you think the Mets, which of these 3 injured players do you think the Mets will miss the most?
I've got to go Winker just because of the way the flexibility with the offense in the lineup is affected by it. You know, because I think that the bullpen's always going to be an ebb and flow every year. You know, it's very hard to predict, and these things do usually happen. Of course, it's, you know, maybe other people are going to be disagreeing with me. Maybe you'll disagree with me, but that is always, you know, if you're Carlos Mendoza or David Stearns, you're always in a very reactive nature when it comes to the bullpen. Jesse Winker, especially after, you know, Jose Siri went down, and of course he's been mostly playing DH, but it still affects the outfield. You know, of course, like he's mostly facing right-handers, but he also came through a couple times when showed confidence in against left-handers, you know, and especially with Brandon Nimmo just so inconsistent. You know, all of a sudden he ties Carlos Delgado for the most RBIs in one game, and then he, you know, obviously he was sick right after that. It's just how these things go. But you know, he's our boy. He goes back to the first pick that the Sandy Alderson regime made. So you know, he is more ingrained, arguably, than anybody on the team in terms of Mets history at this point. And so Jesse Winker really affects the way you can be flexible with Brandon Nimmo. So I got to go Winker here.
Yeah, G-Money Stag saying obliques are usually tricky and take time for players, including Jesse Winker, to recover. Absolutely true. A lot of these players you're seeing with the oblique injuries, I think, as even Shamanaya, who's been out, has had the oblique problem. Who should be the DH? With Winker out, I can't give a lot of DH time, obviously, to Starling Marte. I mean, he is a shell of himself. He did have the big game-winning hit against Philly, but he should not be having that much playing time. 2, he should not be batting fourth. No, absolutely not. I will take Nimmo batting fourth with the issues that he's having way more than I would take Starling Marte. Could Jeff McNeil fit that role? Because I actually prefer not to see Jeff McNeil play defense at this moment in time. He just looks rusty, and I wouldn't mind if Jeff McNeil became that left-handed guy off the, you know, to be the DH.
I agree. I don't know what happened with McNeil defensively. I pointed this out. You know, it's hard to say that like one player can affect the team, especially a player like McNeil in this way, both defensively and offensively. But I don't know he should be a winning player. Yes. And it might be very black and white for me to say that he negatively impacts the culture. And this is going back, I guess, to 2021 with the clashing of the Lindor aura that you know, it's Lindor's team now. Bottom line, it's Lindor's team now. But it's hard. The defense had been so crisp and all of a sudden Jeff McNeil comes back and has been rather sloppy, whether it's in the outfield or second base. But then he'll make a play or he'll get a big hit and like I'm having to eat crow, I guess is the phrase, right? But if you look at the way the team was playing, which might have been out of their gourd anyway, and then you look at when McNeil came back and the way that we've been, basically thank God those wins were in the bank. It's hard not to see a correlation for me. When it comes to DH, you just want to make sure that he has a competitive at bat, and he had one last night. And there was a possibility because of McNeil, had things gone a different way, we would have tied that game, at some point. It's like our boy Lindor grounded into a double play, which is going to happen. Again, like this is 162 games. Like you can't get so hypercritical every single moment. But I do think you're absolutely right and going to Marte, I think about that at bat when everybody was having such great, great competitive at bats against Arizona last week. And I believe it was the one game that we lost when we had the bases loaded, we walked in a run. And then Marte just like looked at 3 pitches, it's just like at some point, I mean, this is going back to not to be too hard on Carlos Beltran after all these years, almost 20, by the way, which is really boggles my mind. But one of the reasons Met fans were so hypersensitive about that at bat against the Cardinals in Game 7 of the 2006 NLCS was because of Mookie Wilson. And it's crazy to think, but Mookie Wilson is one of the sole reasons why Game 6 of the 1986 World Series happened the way it did. He fouled off and fouled off and fouled off until he got out of the way of a hit by pitch so the game could be tied, and then fouled them off and fouled them off and fouled them off. And you just want to see the player make contact, even if it's just fouling it off. Like be competitive, like be hyper in the zone. And because all of these pitches, whether or not they're very good pitches, you got to give credit to the pitchers. They're in the strike zone, obviously, because you struck out on like 3 looking strikes. Like all we want to see is a competitive at bat. And Marte has just not overall, other than the game that I was lucky to be at, the first and only game I've been to so far against the Phillies when he walked it off. That was, a breaking pitch that he found in the zone and muscled it over the second baseman. Not to say that that's what needed to happen, but like you've got, especially after Juan Soto and Pete had such competitive at bats, the game it was right there. That was the game right there. Was Marte's at bat.
Yeah, there's been so many times with Marte as well. Sorry to cut you off there, but there's been so many times with Marte that he's had at bats like that. There are 3 straight pitches. He'll swing at the first 2, doesn't swing at the one right down the plate, strike 3, or vice versa. There's been just so many of these things, and I don't care if he doesn't hit a home run. That bloop hit won the team the game, and that's the most important thing that happened.
Exactly, and you can't just chalk it up to him being 36 years old. And we obviously have to remember that he's on the older side of his career. But I do think, going back to your first question, I think with all of these factors that we're talking about, including Marte, that's why McNeil, especially with the surging of Luis Angel Acuna, you have to consider that you have to keep Acuna out there, and that's going to affect Jeff McNeil's second base playing time.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
where do you put him? You put him at DH.
Yeah, you got to award these guys for their consistency playing, and if they're on a hot streak, like if Luis Angel Acuna is on a hot streak right now, keep plugging him out there at second base. Put McNeil as like we said, put McNeil as the DH. I am okay with that. I am definitely okay, especially with McNeil not having crisp defense at this moment in time. So I will 100% take that. Shout out to, we've just gotten over 100 people that are in this room right now, hanging out with me and Sam in the comment section, in the question. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you're subscribing to Subway to Shea, and make sure you're subscribing to Bedford and Sullivan. That's on YouTube as well. Great history around not only the Brooklyn Dodgers, but just how they kind of transformed New York and Brooklyn at that time. Great watch. So make sure you're tuned in there. I have a question from Lane Turner involving injuries. What is the news on Paul Blackburn, Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas, and Ronnie Mauricio? Ronnie Mauricio was in a double-A game. I think it was yesterday when 1 for 3 had a
and they're calling it a rehab game. So
rehab
that's not
game.
He's not at that level right now.
Yeah. He's still on the way back. I took a screenshot from Andrew Tredenick from NorthJersey.com and the Bergen Record, who had the injury updates for Sean Manaea, who's dealing with that oblique injury. He's getting ready to throw from 120 feet and set to play catch off the mound. That's a good sign there. Frankie Montas, who had the lat injury, throwing his 4th bullpen session. Goal is to face batters by probably either the end of, I want to say, next week. Paul Blackburn was coming back from his knee injury, his next rehab appearance Sunday for Syracuse. So those guys are coming back. We're going to have a couple guys this is good for the pitching for sure. Great to see them get healthier and stronger. And we're going to need this team full with these guys if they are going to get anywhere in trying to win this division.
Yeah, I think I'm going to use this opportunity when it comes to the rotation and these guys coming back to talk about Tyler McGill. Now, I don't want to badmouth Tyler too much because his mother does follow me on Twitter. So, it's like all of a sudden these folks become more human when you're actually connected to them. Like I have a funny John Neese story with that at some point. But what's your opinion on Tyler McGill, and how do you think that Paul Blackburn and Sean Manaea, how do you think that affects Tyler McGill's place on this team?
Yeah, it's going to be very effective, right? Outside of Griffin Canning, who's been probably top 2 pitcher on this Mets rotation. Him, Kodai Senga, David Peterson, you need a lefty in the rotation. He's not going anywhere. So Tyler McGill is really one of the guys that is going to have to step up his game, or he's probably going to the bullpen. Every April, he gets it off to a good start. Every April. And then for some reason, he just loses it. I don't know what it is. And then he got it back in September of last year because let's be honest, I've gotten on Tyler McGill most of his career. He was a huge part of the reason why we went to the playoffs last year. Carlos Ortiz saying, I hope that McGill is not reverting back to his old self, but it just might be the type of pitcher he is. It just might be. I don't know if he's got, what it takes to be that. He's definitely not a top line starter. He's probably that 4th or 5th guy that you can also plug into the bullpen because he can only go about 4 or 5 innings, tops. He just always finds a way to struggle in those mid innings, and that basically derails his game.
I mean, last night he was very hittable. They talk about something that I hear Keith Radd and Howie Rose mention all the time on Mets radio. They're constantly talking about that Stearns and Mendoza, just the whole entire coaching staff, are always like, your stuff is good enough to play at this level. Just throw strikes. But last night he threw strikes and they were hit. Obviously it's one start, but this is a consistent pattern, just like you were talking about, from his entire career. I mean, I believe 2021 was his first season. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So this is, he's becoming veteran status.
Yeah. And he actually pitched way more than he should have. They desperately needed pitching.
Right.
DeGrom was done for the season. All they picked up was Rich Hill at the trade deadline. and they needed someone to just give them 2, 3, 4 innings. And unfortunately for McGill, it was his first season in there, probably past his innings limit, he had no choice but to pitch. So I don't know if that had an effect. We saw him get injuries in the later couple of seasons that might all impact each other leading into, what we have now. But there are some games where he looks absolutely dominant, and then there's others where you just scratch your head.
And it's also that length, like we're talking about with, Clay Holmes, and shout out to Clay Holmes. So far, just massively exceeding expectations. And one of the few in the rotation that is giving you, it's crazy to say 6 innings is length now, but that's what you should, what every single starting pitcher should minimally be doing. And I think, it's we don't have the numbers in front of us the same way that these analytics department do. And all of a sudden, we've been playing baseball for 200 years or something like that. It's coming up to that. You're talking about 1839, right? Although now I'm like talking about Doubleday, which didn't even exist. But from an American perspective, we're 20 years away from the Knickerbockers playing in Hoboken. So, like, this has been a while, and all of a sudden, 3 times through the batting order is becoming overly thought about. And whether it's McGill, whether it's any of these other pitchers, you do see that quick hook in the 6th inning. And I can't necessarily criticize, like they should be, because we're talking about the balance of the quick hook versus what the pitcher is actually giving you. So again, it's what the numbers say, matchups, all of these different things depending on who you're bringing in. It's what comes first, the chicken or the egg, giving you length or the quick hook in the 6th inning. So Clay Holmes is really the only one consistently giving that. And even though Kodai Senga has been ace-like, you have to cut him a little slack in terms of length, because he didn't pitch at all last year, hardly.
Yeah, and you have to consider Clay Holmes is still transitioning from being a reliever, so he is going to exceed huge his innings limit. I mean, I don't know how they handle him when it comes to July, August, September, and if they make the playoffs, if he is starting for this team at that time. He's been able to handle everything they've thrown at him so far. He came into spring training ready, throwing 3 ups as they term it. So, we'll see what happens with Clay Holmes, but he has been fantastic. I had posted a video. If people were impressed with him, you could check that out on Subway to Shea. I've totally been impressed, and I have a feeling you have as well.
And to just really get into the weeds about Clay Holmes, what's been even more impressive is the fact that when he is when they do get hits off of them, they're very soft. He's been like it's death by a
ground ball
thousand
pitcher.
Cuts. Exactly, death by 1,000 cuts if he's getting hit at all. And just yesterday was the first, or 2 games ago, when Clay Holmes pitched, was the first home run given up by any starting pitcher in Citi Field all year. And then Tyler McGill, that's all of a sudden the floodgates open. But that's, I think, the most impressive part about Clay Holmes is the fact that he's just never really hit all that hard.
No, it's great to have a ground ball pitcher in Clay Holmes. And we know that David Stern saw something in him. When David Stern signed him initially, before what came out as he's going to be a starter, I was like, wow, we finally have a nice setup man for Edwin Diaz. It's going to be great out of the bullpen, 1-2 punch. When he said he was going to be a starter, I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. Stearns knows best, right? I mean, I feel like he has picked, Griffin Canning, he picked, and Griffin Canning's 5-1 now. I think combined, they are 10-2. If I have their records correctly, I think that they are 10-2, both Clay Holmes and Griffin Canning, together. So we've gotten great starts from those guys, and it's great to see. G-Money Stacks asking, wait a minute, we haven't heard or seen any reports on Jose Siri, and already he's running. You're kidding. No. Yesterday, I think it was Mendy who said that Jose Siri is a little bit ahead of schedule. He's supposed to be out for 2 months, but for some reason he is ahead of schedule. So if we can get him back in center field, because his defense and the need for a defensive outfielder, Jose Asacar is okay, but you get better defense when you got a guy like Jose Siri out there.
Yeah, and that speed. I mean, it was obvious what he brought on the table, on the bases. Not to mention that his at-bats were much more competitive than we had heard. Obviously, he wasn't necessarily getting his hits, but all you want is for him to get on base. And he was walking at a clip that you didn't expect. And obviously, that could have been an early, small sample size thing. But he clearly makes this much more of a dynamic team. And it seems like his personality really fit well in that clubhouse, and especially with the loss of Jose Iglesias, which I cannot. I'm very understanding of where Stearns was going with that, and a lot of people. He was talking about it at Yankee Stadium the other day that he wanted to come home, and he seems to have a chip on his shoulder about us. But it's hard not to notice that he's hitting 225. The Padres are fantastic this year as well, and I'm sure he's doing wonders for their clubhouses as well. But it seems where you lost some of that, it wasn't just the fact that he was hitting 350 for a good portion of the year. It was that personality and that cheerleader on the bench, and the fact that he was the soul of that run, basically.
Yeah.
The turning around of last year. So like when you get somebody like Jose Siri, who seemed to bring some of that clubhouse dynamic, it's frustrating when he got hurt like this, because you could see what he was doing just alone, being such a cheerleader. Him and Juan Soto seemed to bond. So it's crazy that he's running already, and I guess at this point we may see him within a month if everything goes right.
Yeah, it's crazy how some of these players heal, how it takes longer for other players. You mentioned, Jose Iglesias and the importance of him being on that team last season. Obviously, the Mets thought, you know what? He's another year older. Can lightning strike twice? And is it time to allow our kids who are kind of stacked up? You got between Baty, Acuna, Mauricio. Is it time to give them the opportunity? Brett Baty was the one who won the opportunity, had a great spring, comes into the season and can't get going. The same stuff as every year with Brett Baty. So they send him down once Jeff McNeil comes back. Now he has returned. Now Brett Baty is back, and due to the Jesse Winker injury, he's come back with power. He's hit a couple of home runs on Saturday, again, basically carried the offense because he had 5 RBIs. He had all 5 of the RBIs there. But we saw right before he was about to leave, he started hitting a whole lot better. And we were wondering if he was going to be able to carry that. Last 15 games, batting .289, 4 homers, 10 RBIs, and 3 walks. What should Brett Baty's role be on this team moving forward?
I mean, as long as Mark Vientos is struggling, I don't think Baty's necessarily going anywhere. I don't think that they're going to send Vientos back down. I think he earned enough credit to be staying up here when the need comes to try to figure out who you're once Jesse Winker comes back, or however the roster goes. And it seems as if at this point, they're basically, especially with the DH role part, they have the flexibility to keep both on the team. So as long as Vientos is struggling, and if his power is not there and Baty's power is there, I mean, he's going to be getting more at bats one way or another. And we saw it the other day when Vientos was out of the lineup and Baty was there, and Mendy more or less said, I'm trying to light a fire under. He wants Vientos to be upset about getting taken out of the lineup.
Yeah.
Right now, you have to go with the hot hand. Last year is such a testament to how important every game. It's frustrating to me. I forget what the guy's name is, but I was watching something about the Knicks on Rich Eisen's show, and the guy the bald guy, if anybody watches the clips and the show, the bald guy's a Boston guy, and he was talking about he randomly had this random comment, even though they were talking about baseball, about kind of dismissing watching May baseball. And last year, everything came down to the second to last game of the year, and every game, whether it's be April or May, as much as we say it's early, as much as we say you're feeling it out that Stearns is being reactive and that this is not necessarily the team that we're going to be rooting heavy for in July. Every game, yesterday's game, it could come down to the wire that we're going to be looking back on the fact that the Brett Baty loss game mattered incredibly. The fact that everybody but him could hit. So you have to go with the hot hand right now. I guess that's my point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when I was putting together the rundown earlier this week, before Baty got into any of these games, I was like, is this Brett Baty's last chance? Can he find some staying power here? But like you said, with Mark Vientos playing the way he has been, if he doesn't, light it up, Brett Baty is going to have the opportunity to take the job at third base. I would like to see Mark Vientos not be that one-hit wonder and go through this sophomore slump, although he's been hitting better as of late. But you mentioned the power numbers are not there right now, and that's a very important part of having him on this team. He's not hitting with runners in scoring position. So if Baty starts taking some games away from him, it's possible. And you talked about the 86 team earlier on, and a big thing about that team was platooning. Right? They did a lot of platoons. So I wouldn't be shocked if you had the lefty Baty, the righty Vientos platooning with each other at third base, feeding off of each other. They're good friends. I could see something like that happening. Carlos Ortiz in the chat saying Baty got the Vientos treatment from last year, getting sent down and brought back up. And maybe it's something that lights a fire under Brett Baty and also Mark Vientos that, maybe we're starting to see a platoon at some point. D in the comments saying, time to take my Baty rookie card out of the bottom of the drawer. So yeah, hopefully he has that staying power that we will see there. When I also look at these kids here, you also got to go down to the minors, and we've had some good pitching performances late from these Metsies. And I don't know if you remember the slogan in the 80s, the catch the rising stars, because we're seeing a lot of that with these started. It looks like the Mets are finally have some starting pitching, probably for the first time since that 2014 2015 type run where they had Harvey, Syndergaard, Wheeler, DeGrom, even Steven Matz was a part of that. You look at these pitchers right now, I'm not even going to mention Brandon Sproat. He's a little bit struggling, and I know there are a couple of comments in here, and let me throw them out here. I think it was Stanley Babbage asking, will they call up Brandon Sproat? I think also was asked, Lane Kerner asked if they're going to call Brandon Sproat, but I think the guy is probably Nolan McLean right now. He got assigned to AAA. I know it's only one game, but for AAA Syracuse, he came up his last start there, 7 innings pitched in his debut, 7 hits, gave up no runs, no walks, struck out 7 in the game. And so far this season, he is 4-1 with a 1.08 ERA. Sam, I really do think we see at some point Nolan McLean here. Lane Kerner asking, will he be up by June? And D saying, my friend argues that McLean is far away and that he disagrees. I'm going to also disagree with your friend D. I think that we see Nolan McLean before we see Brandon Sproat.
That's possible. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not in the weeds numbers-wise with a lot of these guys, and It also makes me curious whether I'm guessing Tidwell is going to get one more start. Do you know about that?
I don't know. I don't know if he's. I thought they sent him down already.
Oh, okay.
When they brought up Daniel Nunez, I think he was just there for a spot start.
Okay, so I was kind of curious about that, and you're right. I mean, I think obviously you need to see him, and this was the first time that he was in AAA. He got the call up from AA. Nolan.
Yeah, he got called up last week from the Binghamton Rumble Ponies to Syracuse, and he made his debut, which was a very good 7 innings pitched, 7 strikeouts. Didn't give up any runs, gave up 7 hits, but man, he pitched his butt off.
I mean, this goes back to what we're talking about with some of these injuries with the starting rotation and where they're going to be. I mean, that's 3 potential starting rotation pitchers that could be back in the rotation or have a role at some point in the rotation, especially because they try to get a 6-man rotation going because of Kodai Senga. So depending on where the Paul Blackburns and the Manayas and the Montazes fall, that's where we're going to be talking about these. I think with McLean, you definitely have to see a few more starts before you can even consider it. It could be kind of like the Luis-Angel Acuna or the Matt Harvey type of thing where they shine brighter under the big lights and that at some point, just these levels, there's only so much development they can do. And now they need to see the Pete Crow Armstrongs of the world and the Bryce Harpers of the world. That was just me kind of trolling Met fans by mentioning Pete Crow Armstrong. For some reason, it's just with these guys, whether it's, I was thinking about Jared Kelenic just this morning about how, just thinking about the way that they're just like, oh my God, we're going to regret it. And look at him now, right? he's had a struggle to get his footing, but I digress.
They're basically lottery tickets, right? It's a dime a dozen that you get right. For every one that the Mets get right in David Wrights and the Jose Reyes of the world, you got Lastings Millage, Fernando Martinez, Jared Kelenic, who has not gone off so good start, and then you'll have the Pete Crow Armstrong.
Not to mention,
Pete Crow Armstrong's got to do this for a long extended amount of time. He's off to a hot streak right now, but he's really got to do this for years.
And you mentioned the rotation from 2014, 2015, and it made me think all of those names that you spoke of only went through had one round of rotation, and I think it was like 2017, where we were like, hey, we finally got all 5 of them, and then one of them gets injured. I forget how it went down, but that this is all it's whether it baseball. One of the things that we love about baseball is that it's a metaphor for life. It's very unpredictable. As much as we like to look at the numbers, and it's almost like the stock market. Like, try to see the projections. We can't necessarily know how everything is going to turn out, and you can also not take too much stock from one game. Yep. Going back to what we were talking about with Nolan McLean. So, and just thinking about what was it? Christian Scott is still trying to work his way. He's the forgotten man because of the injury now. Which is like, all of a sudden we were talking about like all of these. We had a lot of they stocked their farm system with those trades with Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. They got hitters back, not pitchers back with those players. But all of a sudden, we're starting to see the pitching lab working its way through. And there's some names that I don't even have off the top of my head that are having incredible performances, lower than AAA when it comes to pitching, going all the way down to Brooklyn. Brooklyn has been generally getting some incredible starts out of their players. And can you remind me who was the guy that got pulled the other day in a 7-inning doubleheader?
Jonah Tong. I was going to bring up Jonah Tong. 6 2/3 innings pitched, 13 strikeouts. He struck out 13, I think, of 18 to start the game. They did end up getting the perfect game. They took him out after 99 pitches. This season, this season only 1-2, 2.57 ERA. But, you talk Jonah Tong, you talk Sproat, McLean, Tidwell, and as you mentioned, Christian Scott. And it's nice to see them finally, because we talked about maybe 21, 22, that this team was not developing enough starting pitching. And they really are going to want to do this, because when you look at free agency, outside of that top ace pitcher, you don't want to pay these pitchers. And he hasn't been doing this. David Stearns has not been paying elite money for starting pitching. I think he wanted to develop these pitchers and maybe pay for position players, but develop the starting pitchers at home and have them grow as part of the team.
Well, going to that, I remember, I thought that Corbin Burns might be on their radar because of Stearns' history with him. And to your point, he was never even going to consider Corbin Burns as a part of this team because of that long-term contract that usually doesn't pan out. I can really just think of Max Scherzer with the Nationals off the top of my head as one that exceeded expectations with that contract and he'll go into the Hall of Fame as a National for sure. So I can't fault him for, and that's the question. You got Minaya, who's going to be here for 3 years, but that's just 3 years. You wonder if these pitchers do start settling in, whether they're going to consider long-term extensions for them when it comes to Stearns. And also just, you were talking about 21, 22 and not developing pitching. The synergy that has been created, the way that Cohen was obviously feeling it out and had enough, Cohen has a proper lack of hubris for somebody in his position that knows that he doesn't always have the right answer, unlike the Wilpons who thought they had the only answer.
Yeah.
And he felt it out. Obviously, there was a lot of turmoil with some of those GMs and some of those front office guys that Cohen had at first. But all of a sudden, he waited for his man. He got his man in David Stearns. And now the synergy between every level of this organization, when it comes to pitching and the development of everybody, whether it be pitching or offense, it's hard not to see what's going on with that. So it's sometimes you really do have to pinch yourself when it comes to this team. As frustrating as they still can be, I can't ever remember having more confidence in a collection of human beings, regarding the New York Mets over the course of my Mets fandom. And just to point out to your viewers right now, it does say converted Mets fan under me, and that's because I was converted from the Yankees back in 2005. So when I say my Mets fandom, it's not that I didn't pay attention to the Mets prior to that, but I like to say that I came of age when I turned 20 years old and realized this was the franchise for me. And it's been quite the 20 years. I am celebrating my 20th anniversary as a full-fledged Mets fan, 2005 being the first season. And it was a good first
Yeah,
year.
you got a good couple of first years. 2000,
Mikheyevich at first base before Delgado, but I think they put me through the grinder after that.
You got the Mets initiation,
exactly.
2007, 2008, and so on. You got to feel it.
2009 to 2014, which was a dark period, you could argue, also really hardened my Mets fandom. And I will always look back on that, kind of the way a lot of fans look back on 1977 through 1983. I think it's a very good correlation, and I can relate to those years, weirdly enough.
We're going to start wrapping up the show shortly, but I want to get to this question from Mets Talk with Hayden. should the Mets look into moving on from Eric Chavez? Now, I talked a little bit about it during the beginning, just slightly about, what this team needs to do offensively. And I don't really know if getting rid of Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes is going to solve the issue of this team not hitting with runners in scoring position. Because as Tom mentioned, we bring back Tom's comment from earlier on in the show. This has been a problem for quite some time now. And I know Eric Chavez has been a part of that. So maybe he is the guy at some point. But what if, you do let him go and we still have the same problem? Now it's the players, right, that who are not hitting, like their philosophy has to change as well. So we'll see. I don't think, as long as this team is winning and as long as they're in first place, I don't see, they would have to have an implosion.
I was about to say, yeah.
They would have to be at least for the season, it would have to be an implosion where this team just doesn't score. Juan Soto is awful all year long with runners in scoring position, where they decide, let's move on from Eric Chavez. But I think for now, I think he's locked in there in that role alongside Jeremy Barnes, which I've never heard of hitting coaches before, but yet, the Mets have them.
Yeah, I was about to say exactly what you said. You'd have to see it crater for him to go anywhere, I really imagine. Today will be, today's an important game. You got to take this series from the Cubs. I mean, just like that last game against the Diamondbacks was very important, because of the tiebreaker. Obviously, this is the first time that we're seeing the Cubs, but we might not be in first place the entire year, and they might not be in first place the entire year. So this could be something that ends up coming back around, come September, when it comes to the rivalry between the Cubs and the Mets, which was a classic rivalry back in the day, but of course because of realignment has kind of fallen by the wayside. So I think that going back to what we were talking about, runners in scoring position, and what it exactly is. I mean, do they need to hyper-focus in on the hitting philosophy, specifically with runners in scoring position? And I look at Juan Soto's at-bat against Arizona as a perfect example. Just to finish that thought, in the ninth inning, I believe, against Arizona in the last game that put a stamp on that series win. I think that's what everybody should be doing with runners on third or runners on second. And that game, the 2 home runs were to the opposite field, and that sacrifice fly was to the opposite field. I'm more impressed with the sacrifice fly than I am with the home runs, because that's what we needed in that moment. We didn't need him to hit a 2-run home run. We didn't necessarily need a bloop single. We needed him to hit it to the outfield and shorten his swing. And that's basically what we're looking for all of these guys. You see these, like I'm thinking there was runners on second and third with 1 out. I forget what the game was. I think it was against Arizona at Citi Field that Nimmo struck out looking, and then Mark Vienta struck out. And we weren't able to tie the game, and we lost the series because of it. So in moments like those, I'm not sure what they're thinking, because they're, especially like in those situations, the way the defense is aligned, you're talking about holes on the infield that you need to hyper focus on, just to shorten your swing. Don't be too big and get it through the hole, or 1 out, get it to the outfield. Try to get it to a left fielder that doesn't have a good arm, whatever. This is, I don't know what Eric Chavez and Barnes needs to do. I forget his first name. I just spaced on Barnes' first name, but I don't know what they need to do in those situations specifically to really hammer home the situational hitting element. But that's where, when we talk about the lack of runners in scoring position numbers, we talk about you got to go to situational hitting. And that's really where they struggle.
Yeah. It's been such a struggle. D saying, get one hitting coach, Carlos Beltran. That's his hot take. That would be an interesting move if the Mets ever did that. I don't
What's
know.
his role currently
I
with the
think
team?
he's an assistant to the general manager
Okay.
or assistant to David Stearns right now.
You can't argue against that. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, and the fact that we've been talking about trying to get him back into the coaching realm after what I think was a quick hook by the
Too
Wilfons.
quick.
Yeah,
Too quick.
It's like he wasn't part of the coaching staff. He was part of the players with Houston. I don't think you needed to move on from him, but this is kind of let bygones be bygones. Beltran's a beloved Met, regardless of that one at bat, and he understood. One of the things he said at that press conference was, "We're going to rewrite history." I think that Beltran still has a lot to give, not just from a baseball perspective, and not just as a front office man. I don't think that is a terrible idea.
Yeah, and even Duran Rivera saying Carlos Beltran is great when it comes to recognizing when pitchers are tipping pitches. I think he would make an excellent hitting coach. So I don't know if that happens here with the Mets, but I would totally be intrigued by it, as I see Sam will as well. So who knows? Maybe that's something that happens down the line here. Now, as we wrap up the show here, a couple of news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens. I want to quickly talk to you about Lindor's new walk-up song, because he added a new song. He added alongside My Girl from the Temptations. He added Ain't No Mountain High Enough by Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. Thoughts on the addition? I kind of love it. I always loved that song. I love the Motown vibes that he's bringing to this thing. And I know people are now going to like overanalyze it, being like, he only got 2 hits with this. Then he got a home runs with this one. So, there will be that out there, but man, I love it. And if the fans are singing it, kudos to Francisco Lindor getting the fans involved.
And I mean, in the last at bat last night, Fox was showing. I did get a chance to tune in real quick to Fox, and they were doing a great job of going through the crowd and showing how jovial Met fans are when those songs are on and when he's up at bat. It really is a family feeling right now when it comes to Lindor and this team in the stands. Like I've always said, it's the Mets family. I even said that to Kelly Shopik back in 2012 when I saw him at an event. I said, "Welcome to the Mets family," and he genuinely was like, "Thank you, man." Kelly Shopik, we're talking random catcher from 2012. So I really appreciate the way the music, like you mentioned that I'm a musician. I would say I'm a singer. I'm still working on the musician part of it. I write songs from a vocal-based perspective. I don't play any instrument, and I try to get musicians involved. But I am not just a singer-songwriter myself, but I've always been just a huge fan of music. You could say popular music from the 20th century onward. I'm always what I love about it is you can always be educated and find more music. It's almost infinite at this point how much music you can collect. And so I'm a big Motown fan. And I also think about what just the symbolism of the title of that song stands for. It's not just, we go to My Girl. It's because of I believe he just finally had a son born, but he has a couple daughters. And so that had a lot to do with what the My Girl walk-up was. And then we got the Temptations in the playoffs coming to sing to the fans. Ain't No Mountain High Enough. This is something, it's always with the Mets. We're always climbing up a hill. And what I love about Mr. Met is he's infinitely optimistic. He is always has a smile on his face, even when he's going like this in that gif. He's got a smile under that hand. And so I really like what it represents, because as great as he has been, he also knows he can be better, and the team can be better. And that's one of the reasons why he is a leader on this team. And I will finish my thought on Lindor by bringing up something that I don't necessarily agree with. There's somebody on Twitter named Li Mike, I like to call him, and it's at Li Weather 516. Shout out. He kind of can be, the sky is falling with the acorn a lot. Every single hyper focused on every single at bat and every single game. And even last night he was saying, like, this team wins games like that last year. This team is in clutch, and I'm always just rolling my eyes about him. But he is dying. Speaking of mountains, he is dying on the mountain that Lindor should be back in the 3-hole. When he hit a leadoff home run the other night, he was like, "Could you imagine if there were runners on base?" I'm like, dude, enjoy things. But with that, I think what he is forgetting is that you really technically only lead off once a game.
Yeah.
That there are going to be runners, hopefully, because of Taylor. We even mentioned Tyrone Taylor, but he's been fantastic and actually is a hard at bat in the 9-hole and is good to give you good at bats with the turnaround. But what I do find this an interesting thing to analyze. And sorry to do this at the end of the show, but what Li Mike is saying is that you put Luis Angel Acuna at the top, and you get Lindor with his MVP numbers back into the driving and runs position in the at bat. And thinking about it, I do think it has the potential, if it comes to that, to lengthen the lineup potentially. However, you also have to look at the turnaround with this team and with Lindor since last year with him in the leadoff hole. And he still has, MVP-like 100 RBI type numbers, even in the leadoff spot. So I just wanted to throw that out there, what your thoughts are on that.
No, he's been out of this world in the leadoff spot. Once they moved him to the top of the leadoff spot, he became that MVP type player, and he's starting to carry it over into this year where he's not off to an awful start to start the season. So I am not moving Francisco Lindor. Like you said, when I was younger, I was like, man, you move the person from the leadoff spot. But like you said, you really only get one leadoff hit, and that's at the beginning of the game. You're hoping that your 7, 8, and 9 hitters are good enough to get on base. And I think with a guy like Acuna, having Acuna 1, Lindor 2, throughout the game, if you have Acuna 9th and Lindor 1, it's the same thing. It's basically the same thing. So, I'm not going to move Lindor. The only person that I feel like this has affected is Brandon Nimmo, because Brandon Nimmo has not been the same since they moved him out of that. I thought he would have been a great 3 hitter, and it just did not come to fruition last year. And it just hasn't worked. So I don't think they're going to mess with the top of the lineup 1, 2, 3. I would have considered at a certain point moving both Soto and Alonso down a spot to throw in Vientos at number 2, because Vientos kind of took off in the 2-hole last year and was really good behind Lindor. But I understand, you want your best hitters at the top. I get it. I'm not going to go too crazy with the lineup on a daily basis. It is what it is. And I'm just fine with it. But to close out the whole thing, just like you, huge Motown fan. It just reminds me of good times with my parents listening to that music. And, you mentioned how it has such more meaning. I thought about this the other day, like, that could be a good rallying cry for this team. That we're past OMG now. OMG's down. That was the rallying cry, but ain't no mountain high enough. Like you mentioned, that could be a rallying cry for this team, just like we are family was for the Pittsburgh Pirates back in the 70s.
And just thinking about it, look the way the year finished. We couldn't get over the mountain that is the Dodgers, and they ended up winning the World Series. I still believe that we would have beaten the Yankees. And I think the Dodgers helped prove that the Mets would have beaten the Yankees, but we'll never know. I think that is a great rallying cry. That especially, it's not just the Dodgers; it's the Phillies, the Braves, the Cubs, all of the NL West. Ain't no mountain high enough. Let's get that championship, baby.
Absolutely. As we close the show, your co-host, we talked about it, Mike Lickleland had passed away, succumbing to ALS. I just wanted to give you the opportunity as we close the show, your final thoughts and just lay it out there. Great guy. It was always great talking with you guys on the Metsian podcast, and I just wanted to give you your opportunity here.
So first of all, Mike, wherever you are, we love you, and I whether it is Mets knowledge, whether it's Brooklyn knowledge. I mean, from he's got baseball in his family as well. This is somebody who was ingrained in this city and Brooklyn itself. It pumped through his veins. He was one of the most knowledgeable about baseball history, including Negro League history. When he was 4 years old, he was living near where I live, near a Holy Cross cemetery, when he ran outside and everybody was out looking at a procession going to Holy Cross Cemetery. And that's when he found out that Gil Hodges was being marched in there for his final resting place. And that's both Brooklyn and Mets history, going all the way back to when he was a child. It was really tough, especially with ALS having such a baseball connection because of Lou Gehrig. And ironically, his treatment was at Columbia Presbyterian, where the Yankees first played in Hilltop Park, I believe is what the name was. That's where the hospital is where that ballpark used to be. So there, and it was raining all week. It was a sunny day for the funeral yesterday. It's weird to say, it was beautiful because you don't want to be in those circumstances, but a funeral is also celebrating life. And we celebrated Michael Colant well yesterday with his family and friends out in Staten Island, where he was laid to rest. Even meeting some people that I had never met when I did the podcast with Mike, what the podcast and what this baseball relationship meant for Mike was so evident just in his family and their reaction to meeting me, some of them for the first time. It was really special. And, I was an absolute wreck in the back of the church, and some lovely lady whose name I don't even know came up to me and handed me some paper towels. And so this is what you discover in both life and death, is these human connections that you make. We first started with Rising Apple back in 2012, and then eventually, when we left it, we carried over with the Metsian podcast with myself, Rich Sparago, and Mike himself. So it's really sad, but we will forever have all that audio where Mike both was jubilant about the Mets and also ranting about the Mets, and also Brooklyn and Dodgers history. So, I will always, the last Mets baseball moment that I had with him out at the stadium was Dom Smith's walk-off in 2019. And I will always have his jubilation. He stood up and was just like shaking. Yeah. And then the last baseball game that I ever went to with him was the Cyclones game in 2021, I believe, or 2021 or 2022, whichever year was the first professional baseball game in the borough of Brooklyn in April since 1957. So whether it be the Mets, whether it be Brooklyn, he will be on my mind till the day I die. That's for sure.
Well, we send our condolences out to not only you, but him and his family. Thoughts and prayers out to everyone. Rest in peace, Mike. And before we wrap up the show, Sam, just let everyone know what you got coming up, what you're working on, and where they can find you on social media as well.
So I'm always trying to find the time to build up this Bedford and Sullivan project, and my most ambitious screenwriting project. I want to make an HBO-style TV series about Brooklyn and the Dodgers, and I've had a podcast that keeps the audience active listeners in the research process since 2013. Bedford and Sullivan Brooklyn, whether that be on Twitter, whether that be on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify. head out there. I have 100 and I think over 150 episodes, both exploring not only the Dodgers history and the National League legacy in New York, including the Giants, but also Brooklyn history. And I've done, some episodes where we're just trying to get the aura of the era, whether it be music, movies, pop culture as well. 1937 to 1957 is where I'm focused on with that team mostly. Also, I'm a converted Mets fan. I haven't been I haven't been consistent over the years since 2015 writing on the blog, but there are some great pieces out that way, I believe, including my first piece, which just basically tells my story, dumping the Navy pinstripes for the orange and blue. And, such is life, c'est la vie. You have to take care of some personal stuff, and whether it be work or just personal life, it's sometimes hard to get these things off the ground. But I do have a lot of material over the years that you can go check out. And I'm very active on X or Twitter, however we want to call it, at @the_Sam Maxwell. So check me out. And Anthony, thank you as always for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
It is. It's always fun talking with you and, chopping up with the Mets. So had to get you on this week. And we got you a new subscriber. Rob just subscribed to Bedford and Sullivan, says thank you very much. So appreciate you doing that. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, Bedford Sullivan, as well as like and subscribe this video and share it with all your Met fans out there. You can follow me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. And you can subscribe if you want to listen to the audio version on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But if you're subscribed to YouTube, you get the opportunity to join in on the chat, join in on the conversation. We had over 148 people tuned in to this show live. So appreciate every single one of you. Appreciate you all. For Sam and Anthony, it has been the Subway to Shea podcast. I always like to end the show. Let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.